headlines. On day 3 of the parliamentary audit, Korea's finance ministry was on the hot seat. Issues under scrutiny included next year's budget, taxes, and real estate policies. And some local news on Korea's job front. Korea's job creation picked up speed, posting the largest jump in 12 months, while new jobs for 20-somethings saw growth for the first time since April last year. Plus, a deadly typhoon hits Japan, killing at least 14 people and causing nearly 20,000 people to evacuate their homes. There are concerns that flooding could complicate cleanup efforts at the crippled nuclear plant in Fukushima. Well, these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Wednesday, October 16th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening with day 3 of the parliamentary audit where Korea's finance ministry was on the hot seat.
And issues under scrutiny included the government's budget for next year, its tax plans, and real estate policies. Our Kim Hyun-ji has our top story.
On Wednesday, lawmakers raised concerns about the nation's public sector debt, which is expected to surpass $900 billion for the first time ever this year. In particular, lawmakers said the unethical and at times corrupt management of state-owned public enterprises must be addressed, along with inefficiencies, because the practices contribute to the increase of government debt. Opposition lawmakers accused the government of not taking the fulfillment of President Park Geun-hye's major campaign pledges seriously enough, based on an analysis of the government budget for next year. President Park has said she will raise necessary funding for her welfare projects by cracking down on the nation's underground economy. She's also said that new taxes will not be introduced and existing ones will not be raised. However, even ruling party lawmakers pointed out Wednesday that the government needs to offer a more detailed plan for how it intends to go about taxing the underground economy. Opposition lawmakers said that President Park's idea for welfare without taxation is fundamentally problematic, and that it will ultimately do more harm than good to the nation's fiscal health. Another issue raised at the audit was the finance ministry's forecast for economic growth next year, which stands at 3.9%. The figure is higher than projections made by the OECD and other research institutes in Korea. Lawmakers said the government's forecast is unrealistically high and that it presents problems for next year's budget. Finance Minister Hyun Ho-seok in response said he feels the figure is accurate. Opposition lawmakers also said the government's real estate policy is only designed to boost home ownership and real estate sales, and does not address the lack of affordable housing options for ordinary people. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
And turning to some positive economic news, the nation's job market is picking up speed, posting the biggest job growth in the year in September.
And while the nation's youth still bears the brunt of unemployment, people in their 20s saw the first increase in job opportunities in almost a year and a half. Our Shin Se-min has the September job numbers.
Job creation accelerated last month when the employment rate for people in their 20s grew for the first time in 17 months. Statistics Korea said Wednesday that more than 25 million were employed in September, up more than 460,000 from the previous year. The September jobs numbers also reflect the largest gain in 12 months when more than 680,000 new positions were added to the economy. The employment rate for people between the ages of 15 and 64 edged up 0.5 percentage points to 65% in September, a healthy figure by the international standards, but still below the current administration's target of 70%. The agency said that a rise in regular or salaried workers and a decline in the number of self-employed people had helped boost job creation by more than 400,000 jobs per month for 2 straight months. By sector, the health and social welfare services added the most jobs at over 172,000 in September from a year earlier, followed by the accommodations and restaurant businesses. In probably the most significant development, new jobs created for people in their 20s total 36,000, representing the first growth since April last year. Despite the added jobs, however, labor market conditions remain sluggish for the youth group. The jobless rate for people aged 15 to 29 stood at 7.7% in September, compared with the nation's overall jobless rate of 2.7%. The job data is in line with the government's projection that the nation's economy is on track for a steady recovery. The Korean economy grew 1.1% in the second quarter of this year from the previous quarter, rising above 1% for the first time in more than 2 years. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
We take you down south now to the Korean city of Daegu, where the World Energy Congress is well underway.
President Park Geun-hye stopped by to deliver a speech during which she elaborated on Korea's energy policies and proposed ways to secure clean and safe energy. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju reports.
President Park has pledged to develop Korea's energy industry into a driving force in her push for a creative economy. Speaking at a special session of the World Energy Congress in Daegu on Wednesday, President Park introduced a plan to use information and communications technology in energy storage and management systems to reduce energy consumption and then sell the saved energy to a power exchange market. By doing so, President Park said Korea could reduce the peak demand for electricity to at least 1 million kilowatts by the year 2017, create 15,000 new jobs, and a market worth $3.3 billion. The president proposed 3 ways to overcome the current energy challenges facing the world, which he called the energy trilemma.
깨끗하고 안전하며 모두에게 이용 가능한 에너지를 확보하기 위해서는 지금까지의 대응 방식에서 벗어나 과감하고 발전적인 전환이 필요합니다.
She first called for a new system in which energy producing and consuming countries could cooperate to create a stable energy market and carry out joint projects for resources development. President Park emphasized the importance of investing more in developing new energy technologies, from smart grids to eco-friendly cars, to minimize the negative impact on the environment and to boost job creation. She also said countries should revise their current energy policies and regulations, especially their pricing systems, at a time when the focus is being shifted to clean and safe energy. The World Energy Congress, dubbed the Energy Olympics, is held once every 3 years. This year's event is the biggest ever, with some 6,000 energy-related officials and experts from 110 countries participating. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
And early next month, President Park Geun-hye will embark on an 8-day trip that will take her to France, Britain, and Belgium.
Her first stop, Paris, from November 2nd to the 4th, where she'll hold bilateral talks with French President Francois Hollande. The Korean leader will then travel to Britain for a 4-day state visit on the invitation of Queen Elizabeth II. In addition to meeting with the Queen, President Park is also expected to hold a bilateral summit with British Prime Minister David Cameron and discuss ways to boost cooperation in the creative economy sector. She will end her European visit in Belgium, where she will hold a one-on-one with Prime Minister Elio Di Rupo and meet with the heads of the European Council and the European Commission for talks on bolstering trade based on the Korea-EU FTA. Typhoon Wipa, the strongest typhoon Japan has seen in a decade, slammed into the northeastern part of the island nation on Wednesday.
It has killed at least 14 people and raised concerns over the already leaking Fukushima nuclear plant. Han Da-eun has the latest.
Japan's state-run broadcaster NHK has confirmed that 14 people were killed after Super Typhoon Wipa hit the nation on Wednesday. Most of the deaths occurred on Izu Oshima, an island south of Tokyo Bay, where more than 800 milliliters of rain were recorded earlier in the day, the most to fall in the region since 1938. Authorities say that roughly 50 residents of Oshima remain unaccounted for. The Japan Meteorological Agency says the typhoon has now passed past northern Iwate Prefecture and is quickly moving northward, packing winds of up to 126 kilometers per hour. The typhoon flooded homes and caused power outages and mudslides in some areas in and around Tokyo, where local authorities advised more than 23,000 households to evacuate. To the concerns of many, the typhoon passed through the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant at about noon local time, but no reports of damage have been made so far. The plant's operator, Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, released about 40 tons of rainwater that had accumulated in the compound into the sea, which it claims had previously cleared tests for radioactivity. However, there are lingering concerns as strong winds have further complicated cleanup efforts at the nuclear site. 한다은, Arirang News.
Founded over 5 years ago, the Climate Change Center here in Seoul has worked to motivate citizens to tackle global climate change and to offer policy proposals to decision makers.
But tonight we are joined by the organization's general manager, Choi Jung-hoon, to tell us why Korea has taken an active role in the battle. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we've seen recent data indicate that from 2000 to 2011, the world has not warmed up as much as UN computer models have indicated, and this data comes from NASA. Is the debate over the data regarding climate change still as cloudy as ever, or is it clearer now with this new information?
Well, I think the science is pretty clear, and the scientific evidence of global warming, in fact, has only strengthened in recent years. You know, if there's one body that represents the international scientific consensus on global warming, it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. IPCC recently released its fifth report on the science of global warming, and the report basically says that warming of our climate system is now unequivocal, and that humans are in fact the major cause of global warming since the 1950s.
So according to your research, how quickly is the planet heating up?
Well, take a sea level rise, for instance. The IPCC projected that the pace of a sea level rise, the global sea level rise, would only accelerate in the future. You know, the IPCC also says that the sea level will rise by up to 98 centimeters by the end of the century. The Korea Meteorological Administration did a similar study and concluded that by 2050, the sea level in Korea will rise by 27 centimeters, and that's about 3 times as much as previously expected.
Well, in terms of measuring the sea level rise in centimeters, that might not have a direct kind of impact on people, but we do feel temperature changes, seasonal changes. What kind of changes are people feeling around the world?
Well, you know, of course, the number of cold days is getting shorter, whereas the days of hot weather, it's getting longer. And also, patterns of rainfall in many regions of the world is also being altered. And a new study just published in the journal Nature basically says that climate change will increase the intensity of El Nino. And El Nino is something that, in fact, has a drastic impact on the rainfall patterns, and can also trigger severe droughts and floods. And also here in Korea, we see more and more torrential rains, and also sweltering heat in the summer. And also the days of night with the tropical nights, in fact, has also increased. The types of plants that grow in Korea has also changed. If we apply the worst case scenario to Korea, based on the projection made by IPCC, in fact, major infrastructure facilities in the southern and western coastal areas of this country will be seriously damaged by flooding by the end of this century. And those affected facilities will likely include Incheon International Airport and nuclear power plant down in Yeonggwang. And you know, if this were to be coupled with other natural disasters like typhoons or tsunami, you can in fact only imagine you know, how catastrophic the consequence will be.
So what can be done by the Korean public and the government, and are you finding it hard to motivate these groups to do something?
I think the government should really try to communicate with people that climate change is a present problem. And what I mean by that is that in Korea, climate change is still largely perceived as a future problem, whereas it's already happening, and I think many of us are already, in fact, feeling the impacts of it.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Choi Jung-hoon from Climate Change Center. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report.
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on to Mueller trying to cover up the South's true intentions.
Less than a day remains until the United States crashes into its debt ceiling, but still no deal in Washington to raise the spending limit or even to reopen its shuttered government. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports on the negotiations stretching into the 11th hour.
The budget battle between Republicans and Democrats has started to tug at the country's AAA credit rating. Ratings agency Fitch warned that it could downgrade the U.S. rating by one notch due to the political brinkmanship and reduced financing flexibility that could increase the risk of a U.S. default. The U.S. Treasury Department has warned that a default might trigger a financial crisis and recession that could echo the events of 2008 or worse. The credit agency's move comes after a series of failed attempts to solve the crisis. Senate Democrats called off two proposals advanced by the Republican-controlled House of Representatives ahead of the Thursday deadline. The new compromise had also failed to satisfy President Barack Obama and the Tea Party activists in the House, who are demanding changes to President Obama's signature health care law as part of any budget deal. Obama rejected the second plan, which included a provision to delay a tax on medical devices for 2 years that helps to fund the healthcare law, and would extend the federal debt ceiling of $16.7 trillion until February 7th. The plan would also extend government funding, but only until December 15th, so accepting that plan could mean another government shutdown before the end of the year. In comparison, a plan advanced by the Senate would keep the government open longer until January 15th. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has been partially shut down since October 1st, which has placed hundreds of thousands of employees on temporary leave. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
In Geneva, the most hopeful talks between Iran and world powers in years. The outcome of the dialogue wasn't made public, but it is believed that Iran has outlined to the U.S. and 5 other nations a timetable for a confidence-building deal that could end the standoff over its nuclear program. Our Kim Young-gil has more on the Iran nuclear talks.
With PowerPoint slides and lofty promises, Iran has presented to the world what it says is a plan to break a decade of deadlock over its nuclear program. Bringing the US, Russia, China, France, Britain, and Germany, or the so-called P5+1, to the table, the 2-day meeting in Geneva has raised hope the two sides can reach a compromise.
We have come here with a sense of cautious optimism and a great sense of determination, because we believe it is really time now for tangible results.
The details of the closed-door meeting were not disclosed, but the atmosphere was said to have been positive. There was also a rare private meeting between Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Washington's chief negotiator Wendy Sherman.
We are very serious. We are not here to just symbolically, we are not here to waste our time. We are serious for a real target-oriented negotiations between Iran and the other side. And we believe that the plan that we have introduced has the capacity to reach that.
The Geneva talks, the first since relative moderate Hassan Rouhani was elected Iranian president in June, are widely seen as the best chance for years to defuse the standoff. Rouhani has promised to lead diplomatic efforts to get the economic sanctions eased, but P5+1 officials have said Iran must prove its sincerity through concrete steps before that can happen. In the past, the six powers have demanded Iran halt uranium enrichment to 20%, which is a threshold that could lead to nuclear weapons capability. The talks will continue again on Wednesday. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The second round of KBO playoffs got started with the Seoul rivals, the Tusan Bears and LG Twins, going head-to-head.
And Stephen Che joins us from the Sports Center to tell us who took Game 1. Hello there.
Hey guys, it was a packed house over at Seoul's Jamsil Stadium as the Bears and Twins fought for Game 1. It's No Kyung-eun for the Bears, it's Ryu Jae-guk for the Twins. Now we go on over to the first inning. It's Tusan's Kim Hyun-soo. He's coming up right here. He knocks in the first series run, and that's all before Jung Soo-bin comes home on an error. It's 2-0 Bears. Now same inning, LG's Lee Byung-gyu. He's up at bat. He slams this two-run shot to left. It's tied 2-2. Now we go on to the seventh. Choi Jung-suk of the Bears at bat. The error brings home the runner. Tusan's up 3-2. They add one in the ninth, and the Bears win Game 1 with a final score of 4-2. Moving on to Major League Baseball, the LA Dodgers failed to tie up the National League Championship Series with the St. Louis Cardinals in Game 4. The Dodgers' Ricky Nolasco only pitched 4 innings, and it was the third that did him in. He gave up 3 runs, including a 2-run homer by Matt Holliday. And with the 4-2 loss, St. Louis is just 1 game away from the World Series. Meanwhile, on the other side, Boston beat Detroit 1-0, going up in their series 2-1. Now we end things off on the hard court. Let's talk about Wednesday's top games from the KBL. First, it's KGC taking on the KT Sonic Boom in Busan. It's KT's Cho Sung-min. He drops 2s and 3s all game long. He ends up perfect from the field with 27 points for the night. On the other side, KGC's Marquin Chandler scores a team-high 17, but it's just not enough. KT beats KGC 70-58. Meanwhile, it's the LG Sakers taking on the Dongbu Promi at Changwon. For Dongbu, it's 4th-year veteran Herbert Hill. He scores 26 points and grabs 10 boards for his second double-double of the season. It's Dongbu over LG, 77-67. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Well, as you can see, the cold weather is moving in, and morning temperatures in most parts of the country dropped to the single digits on Wednesday.
And I noticed that a lot of people have broken out their thick jackets and scarves this morning. So let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center for the latest forecast. Now, Bo-kyung, what can we expect tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow's forecast to be colder than today, so make sure to dress warm when heading out in the morning. For details, let's move on to our satellite map. Well, as you can see, we have clear skies across the map due to a high-pressure system from China. Now, I know that many of you are wondering if things are going to get colder, but it looks like these colder-than-average temperatures will stick around until Friday. Other than that, tomorrow morning is expected to be the coldest of the season so far. Nonetheless, we will get back to our typical autumn temperatures over the weekend. Now, taking a look at tomorrow's numbers, Seoul and Gwangju's morning temperatures dropped to 7 degrees before reaching 19 in the afternoon. And Busan should stay relatively warm with a low of 11 degrees. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon drops to 4 degrees in the morning with a high of 17. Meanwhile, Mount Kumgang should get down to -4 degrees with a high of 8. Well, that's all I have for you this hour. Hope you have a wonderful evening, and I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
Thanks, Po-kyung. And that's our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. We leave you now with some images of special nighttime tours of Gyeongbok Palace, which started tonight and will run until October 28th. See you soon.